So welcome to the fourth and the final of our education outcome area working groups. Thank you for being with us for the previous three and joining us for the final one today. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First and foremost, I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. We will be posting the recording of the meeting, slides, and transcripts to the Broadband for All portal, and we will provide that link in the chat for you. Just a note that you don't need to make your own transcripts, so we will take care of that for you. And as we move forward, well, let's just take a look at the agenda. Melanie, if we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the things we're focusing on right up top is a summary of the key takeaways from our May meeting, followed by a group of panelists from the education field to speak to us about the unique barriers faced by the covered populations that they serve within the education community, and what their organizations are doing to help address barriers and solutions that they have seen within their environment be very effective. As we've done in the past, we'll have an interactive discussion about lived experiences, hearing from all of you about the impact of the digital divide on your lives. And then we're going to wrap up with some calls to action information about our surveys that are out there and live right now, and then we'll wrap it up. So before we get too far into things, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our takeaways from the previous meetings. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. A note for those of you who are deaf or hard of hearing, please select the side-by-side speaker mode to be able to view the ASL interpreter. For those of you who want closed captioning, that functionality is also available on the toolbar. We also have chat. Please introduce yourselves in chat. Tell us who you are, if you're comfortable telling us where you're at today, who you're with. We would love to hear about that. And then when we get to the discussion period, we're going to ask you to use the raise hand feature on the bottom of your screen. And that way we'll be able to call on people and unmute and have you participate in the conversation with us today. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into our takeaways from our the May outcome area meeting. These are the three kind of top ones that we had within the meeting. One was that funding specifically related to COVID-19 help support some real innovation in the digital equity programs that California's education system implemented during the pandemic. Schools have utilized a variety of methods, including hotspots, community wireless networks, and free and discounted devices for students and their families to help narrow and close the digital divide, as well as digital equity programs within schools and also virtually during COVID as well. One of the very interesting things that we took away from that was also that digital equity programs aren't just when we talk about education. They're not just for students that we think of maybe between the K-12 world of education, but really these programs are critical to students of all ages, including our adult learners, and they must be adapted to serve a wide variety of students. So those are what we had from the discussion in the May meeting. And then if we want to move on to the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the outcomes from this group that we heard about barriers to digital equity. So and I understand I'm reading the slides to you, but just want to make sure that we're very clear. So lack of quality network speed really impacts achievement gaps in education. insufficient network speed. So just not even having the bandwidth necessary to participate in education, disproportionately affecting students in both rural and remote areas. And then across the board, access to affordable devices. And when we say sufficient for education needs, sometimes that's not just the least expensive device that you can get in a big box store. Sometimes there are requirements that a device is a little bit more powerful and therefore a little bit more expensive to be able to participate in education. So making sure that those devices are affordable and that people have access to those. So those are the barriers that we identified. So let's look at some of the recommended strategies. So some of the recommended strategies that came out of the conversations were continued coordination, collaboration, and leadership among a wide group of government education entities, the promotion of the Affordable Connectivity Program that we refer to as ACP, and being able to provide free or low-cost devices to students, either through ACP or through other low-cost programs. Supporting digital navigators that are capable of assisting with literacy programs, helping deliver training, and these are across the board. There are a lot of digital navigator programs out there, but not just for the students, but also for their parents, in some cases their caregivers, so that everyone in the family or in the sorry, I'm not finding the word that I want, but so that everyone has the skills not only to use the devices, but also assist those who need to learn some digital skills as well. Sharing information and programs related to digital equity, really throughout. When we say educational networks, education in California has a tremendously broad reach. So making sure that we're sharing that information out and creating awareness about the programs that are out there and available to students and families. And then lastly, providing targeted marketing and culturally sensitive engagement, inclusive of all educational audiences. So those are both the barriers and strategies, and we're going to now move into a conversation with our panelists here today. And we're going to start with Mike Provenost from CSU, California State University, Dr. Chelsea Pham with Hartnell College, Marianne Dewan at Santa Clara County Office of Education, Kathy Parker, who is formerly with Tuolumne County Office of Education, and Jeff Below, who is at the California Department of Education. So the things that we asked this group to talk about are what are some of the recommended strategies to address digital equity barriers? Which of those strategies would be most useful in increasing digital literacy and inclusion? And for the strategies to be successful, what kind of partnerships are needed? So those are what we asked our speakers to share with you. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of kick off the conversation, and then you can just pass it over to Chelsea, and then Jeff, when we get to you and you wrap up, just kick it back over to me. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so my name is Mike Provost. I currently serve as the Director of Technology at the California State University Chancellor's Office. And so one of the programs that we really spearhead for our students around the digital equity space is called C-Success. That stands for CSU Success. And the idea is, how do we provide mobile technology to students that don't have access to that? And so we're in year 2 of that program, and the program isn't really as you would probably think of it as where students indicate, hey, I need a device. Can I be provided one on like a small checkout sort of loaner program? Instead, the program is more focused holistically around how do we make sure that that student feels comfortable using that device and loading that device with all of their information that they'll use throughout their career? And part of that is, as you had alluded to in an earlier slide, is making sure that they have access to a high quality device. So one of the things that we do is we actually had initially surveyed students on what do you foresee as a high quality device in your mind? And what our students had settled on is an iPad or Windows Surface Laptop Go. So we said, these are the two devices that we're going to try to centralize on, and then students would get their choice. And so when we talk about partnerships, it's really important because you need a strong executive champion who's spearheading that and saying, this is the direction we're going. We are going to provide a device to all students that need that access. And initially, we've learned a lot through the last couple of years, but we spearheaded a similar program at Fresno State in my previous role called Discover-E. And it was a similar program, only what I would say is that what we wanted to identify is, how do students feel comfortable receiving technology? Because initially when we said, fill out a form online if you're interested in getting access to a device, and surprisingly, students wouldn't do it. And when we asked students why, they indicated that they didn't want to be singled out, that they couldn't afford a device or they didn't have access to high-speed internet. And they were afraid that if they walked around with a device provided by the university, their peers would think differently of them. So we decided, let's roll this into the entire equation. All students are just going to be asked if they want a device when they start at one of our CSU campuses. So partnership is very important. What we did is we partnered with our student affairs teams to make sure that when students get admitted to any one of our CSU campuses, that they're met with, congratulations, you've been accepted to a Fresno State or a Sacramento State or any one of these universities. And that's followed by, would you like access to an iPad or a Windows Laptop Surface Go? And it's just a part of the experience. And so students show up first day. What we find is that approximately 20% of our students have never owned a piece of technology. They've never had a device to call their own. So what we know is that when they pick that device up, we simply don't just hand it to them. We've got to go through a training process. We start from the ground floor, and we do this in a one-on-one format. Because what we found is that if we do this in a group format, a lot of those students won't ask questions, or they won't, they feel like in their mind, quote unquote, it's a dumb question and they just won't ask it. And so instead, we want to do this one-on-one in a very comfortable, safe space for students to ask questions, to show them how to utilize the newest apps or productivity apps to help them in their classes. And then similarly, we want those students to also feel comfortable about where to come back to ask for help. What we found, interestingly, is when we start doing these trainings with students, we initially had like a help desk set up with full-time staff, and students said they didn't feel comfortable going there because they felt like, again, they didn't want to waste a full-time staff member's time with what they thought was a dumb question. So what we did is we set up specifically an area at each of our campuses that has a student help desk. And it's students helping students. And what we found was that these students would engage in much different ways and in new ways. And they have no problem going to talk to their friends about, hey, did you know on this app, or did you know on TikTok they've got this channel that shows you how to use this in a new way? And that's not something that they would have engaged with in our full-time staff at that level. And so what that's kind of morphed into is its own support structure, where these students have actually created this idea where it's called Appy Hour, where every week we have a student that volunteers to do a training on their favorite app. And students from all over the campus come, it's advertised, hey, this week this app is going to be this. If you're interested, come and you could do it virtually, or you can show up. And these students, the crowds grow larger and larger. And they're taught by other students about, hey, this cool app does this and that. And so what's cool is that students are taking ownership of that and providing more feedback to us on, it would be cool if we had a pencil so that we can do this in that class and it would help. Similarly, our faculty actually, knowing now that our students come to class with these devices, and have access to the internet when they go home, they now allow them to go through a course redesign process where those classes now leverage technology and the devices that they have to do new and engaging things in their course. And what we found after doing this from both our discovery program and our C Success program over a span of close to 10 years is that when all students are provided technology and they're given electronic course materials, so everybody has equitable access to the materials, on average, students experience a half a letter grade improvement in their courses and a faster 4-year graduation rate among the students that receive technology. So for us, that was really important because that really hit home as to giving our students access to the resources they need to be successful. And lastly, I'll say that when it comes to how do we get the word out, how do you spread the message? It's important to have a strong executive champion, but what's really interesting is initially before we were sending out these letters to students, it was championed and tweeted by our president, and that was great. Some students initially would get the message through that, but what we found is after the first 3 days of class, we'd get this huge wave of students that would come in and say, hey, I heard we get a free iPad, or I heard we get a hotspot. And what we found is obviously the best way to send that message is to use the students because they all talk to each other, right? And that's generally the way a lot of this stuff happens. Did you know that we have a health center? Did you know we have this and we have all this at our fingertips? So the key is also to equip our students so that they can also become ambassadors. And part of that is bringing them into the conversation on how can we help provide resources to allow you to participate in new and innovative ways. And so that's just kind of in a nutshell how we've looked at it at the CSU level. Happy to pass it on to the next panelist.
Thank you so much, Mike. Again, my name is Chelsea, and I'm the Chief Information Systems Officer for Hartnell Community College, and we're located in sorry about that. What the digital equity strategies that we've done at our campus is we have a program called the Salinas Valley Promise Program. And when students enroll in this program, they're enrolled as full-time students and they automatically get a laptop from us. So these programs are funded by the foundation of our college and the cities around us who actually offer us the funds to get this for our students. They not only get a laptop, but they also get mentorship and they get training. And we have courses here that can help them, learn how to use the devices. And what we also do is we cater to certain populations. Like we have populations for veterans, right? We have a veteran center where we have computers there. Each of our centers for different populations, we actually have computers sitting there, and there's somebody there that could help them use the computer. And we have computer labs, which they have access to also. In addition to that, we also teach at some of the prisons. So we have incarcerated students that are part of our population, and we actually bring the devices into the prisons and teach, and hold classes there. Sometimes we don't have internet at the prisons already available, but we bring hotspots in so students can learn that way. And, when they graduate, we also have a program for them, to help them bridge the gap and come back, to outside, and blend in. So those are really good programs. We also discovered that a lot of students, depending on the technology they have and the different classes they're taking, they can't do everything at home or on their computer, right? Like you can't have AutoCAD really, located on like a local computer. They can't do that anywhere. So what we did was we actually worked with through this thing called app streaming through AWS. So you could actually stream the entire, either Photoshop or AutoCAD, which are high intensity programs, through a Chromebook. So just using a browser, you can actually do your AutoCAD homework at home because it's actually relying on everything from the server side in Amazon. And that opened the doors for so many of our students who are in rural areas. Our district from the main campus to our furthest campus is 1 hour away. It's 50 miles. And these students we're in an area where it's farmland. There's no internet. And transportation is very difficult for most of our students because they're farm migrant workers, right? So they don't have transportation. So by having these available, and when the pandemic hit, we were able to provide thousands of Chromebooks for our students. And through that, they were able to really, take online learning to the next level, because some students they can't succeed because they don't have access to technology or how, or, to communicate to their faculty or anything. We also do things in bilingual in different languages because we have a high population of Hispanics. We're a Hispanic Serving Institute. So everything we do is sorry, my light's off, in different languages. And so that's how we're able to help kind of bridge this gap. I also work very closely with our faculty. So when new technology comes out, I go to the faculty, go, what are you teaching? Are you teaching Office 365 now? Are you teaching, making sure that they're at the speed that technology is moving and our technology matches what's in the classroom? So we really work closely with our business faculty to try to accomplish that. And what really helps is just access to information. Like before I was joining the group here and met, the staff here in Monterey, I didn't know there was a program for low-cost internet. Right. And if we could have those materials available, even at the college, we have a head count of 12,000 students a year. We could really reach those populations and say, hey, for your families, and they'll tell their families that they have these programs available. So just the availability of information, through the colleges and locally to the communities is really good. And that'd be really helpful. And I found that peer communication works the best, as Mike mentioned, also, like our veterans, they typically don't approach faculty or administration, ask questions. They're more comfortable asking their peers. So we set up the areas, the Veteran Center, or even like Emoja, where African-American students, they come there and there's peers there they can talk to. So we have multiple programs like that throughout the campus where they can go sit with their peers and learn, and learn about different programs and different resources that are there. So that sums it up for my college. Now on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Chelsea. Just gonna jump in here really quick before we move on. But Chelsea, I just wanted to thank you. I think the peer communication piece is huge. So really appreciate you sharing that too as a trusted messenger. And it's really nice to see the work that you're doing involving both justice, involving veterans, and also driving adoption with ACP. So thank you so much for that. We are going to move on to Marianne Dewan for Santa Clara County Office of Education.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm just going to hit the highlights on a few of the initiatives and things that we've been doing related to digital equity. It is one of the key priorities that we have in our office. Actually started well before the pandemic, but accelerated, as a result of enduring. So one of the areas that we focus on is accessibility for technology and devices. So we do have some initiatives, partnerships, and programs where we attempt to provide devices low cost, refurbished, and likewise to families that need them. We have a couple of partners within the county who receive some funding and assist us in that work. Another effort that we had was to raise awareness about the low-cost programs. A couple of things that we did and to send information, letters, and postcards to all of the eligible families direct to their homes. We also distributed those through some of our community-based organizations and other partners. And we worked with some of our community-based organizations who have different language experience and are embedded in some of our communities to further assist us in raising awareness about ACP and helping families sign up, as well as getting them registered for digital literacy classes within their primary language at home. Another area that we've worked on quite significantly was to attempt to address one of the biggest barriers, which is infrastructure. Two projects I want to mention. One was related to our students who reside at our migrant camps. We had one particular camp where we learned that we had over 100 students that were residing there, and they had no access to the internet. We initially did a soft program where we provided hotspots and temporary system, and then we worked to pull fiber to the camp, and then to create a strong broadband network at the camp, and then getting it set up so that not only our students, but all of the residents are able to access broadband service for whatever amount of time that they're there. And additionally, we worked with the operators of the camp to provide digital literacy and homework help and support to students there. Another infrastructure project that we worked on was related to putting towers in the Santa Cruz Mountains and putting equipment within some of the homes of our families who live in the Santa Cruz Mountains to try to increase the strength of the signal for their cell service. That is a very small project. It is going well, and we may be able to expand or replicate that one in the future. Another area I wanted to mention was around privacy, security, and safety. A big concern that many of our communities expressed to us, especially some of the families who were hesitant to accept hotspots or equipment from our office, or even to sign up for ACP, was that they didn't feel safe and they didn't know for sure how to protect themselves against fraud, nor how to know what their children might be doing online. And so some of the work that we did was around providing information and support, training around protecting their private information, around confidentiality, and online security and safety. We have a partnership with School to Home. A number of our school districts are working with School to Home to support equipment and training so that students have devices that they're able to use at school, but they are able to take them home, but the family also gets support. And that program is in a number of our higher need school districts. And then lastly, I just wanted to share another example of how we've built into our infrastructure digital equity for some of our most vulnerable students. Our students in our Opportunity Youth Academy are all students who are former foster youth, previously justice engaged, separated from school in one way or another, insecurely housed, or experiencing some other significant challenge. And every student who's enrolled in our program, they're age 16 to 24, they receive a device when they're enrolled in the program. And that device is something then they are able to keep, especially upon graduation, but it allows them to not only continue their studies when they're not in our classrooms, but also to help them with employment, applying for services and aid, and taking care of other fundamental needs, enrichment, finding childcare, and other things that they might need. So those are just a few of the examples of our digital equity initiative. And I did put a link to our one of our web pages in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. DeJuan. That was fantastic. I have to say, being a native of the Central Valley, where we have a lot of migrant students, hearing about the infrastructure project at the migrant camp particularly resonates with me. I know that Scott wanted to add something, so Mr. Adams, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And hi, everybody. I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy. And I thought it would be appropriate after hearing, both Dr. Pham and Dr. DeJuan give their presentations to kind of point out that we're at this point in the digital equity and planning process where we're seeing a convergence of the different components of the planning process where, Dr. Dewan was one of the planners and the host of the Silicon Valley, regional planning workshop down in San Jose, and Dr. Pham and I actually shared a table in the small table discussions at the Central Coast event in Seaside. And so not only is it a convergence of different individuals and subject matter experts who we've met out in the regions and bringing them to the virtual space to talk specifically about this, but just really a convergence of common themes that we have heard, particularly in the education space about, both along access and the, unique instances of that Dr. Dewan mentioned about, the County Office of Education actually taking the infrastructure piece in their own hands and connecting the migrant communities or the folks in the Santa Cruz Mountains to the affordability piece, and how schools and educational entities are really great messengers for the ACP. And then even going back, to Mike and the C Success program that, as far as adoption goes, devices and training are so critical. So I think it's just not really a surprise after all that all of us have done to kind of convene together. And just wanted to say thank you, and really looking forward to the next couple speakers.
Thank you, Scott. Kathy Parker, we would love to hear from you about your experience as when you were superintendent at Tuolumne County Office of Education.
Thank you. It's good. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I retired from county superintendency in November of this past year, and then promptly was taken out of retirement to work with our local hospital around community benefit. And a lot of the intersection of broadband and access to broadband impacts our work here also at the community benefit level. But I want to share with you my experiences trying to bring Tuolumne County access to many of the resources that are available only through broadband access. We have about 55,000 people in our county. It's a fairly large diverse geographic area north of Yosemite. And we tend to have most of our broadband access located in our main city, which is Sonora, with about 5,000 people. So 50,000 or so people in our community have either no broadband or limited access to broadband. What we did as a county is we made a concerted effort to access any and all projects that were available through work with the schools, because we knew schools were the access point for other broadband initiatives. And the ones we took advantage of were the big projects, the big one and the 2.0. Big stands for Broadband Infrastructure Improvement Grants. We were able to expand our access into areas that had previously been broadband or even any kind of internet deserts. Groveland is located just outside of Yosemite National Park, so you can imagine it's not quite populated, but it has a lot of traffic through there, and we do have some schools out there. We also have schools that are up in what would be considered very rural, remote areas in the forest. And through those big projects, we were able to come up with some creative ways to get schools access to higher speeds. We even have a nice big sugar pine tree up in a forested area that has a satellite dish that bounces off of two mountaintops and makes it down to the county schools office so that they actually have some access to high speed. This also allowed us to expand our partnerships with our local ISP providers, and that's where we found during the pandemic and the need to expand these services. That's where it really became evident that that was an important piece to this puzzle. We were able to deploy the devices that we needed and even hotspots, but what we found was that even with all of that, there was just no access in a large part of our area. But through our partnerships, we were able to create drop-in centers that people could access by coming to the school sites, even the remote school sites, so that not just our school students could get on to access online learning, but also public Wi-Fi in a secure way was made available, which really helped people during this pandemic who could not go into work but needed to get work done. We also worked with our partners at Columbia College, our community college that's here through, I think Promise is now a universal scholarship program, but we started a Promise program long before that. And we provided not just technology, but also the devices people needed to get on with technology, even if they were using their own phones as hotspots. Being able to provide them financial incentives to be able to do that was important. We were the recipients of 2 grants for the building of resilience centers due to the rim fire. And those are in 2 areas that are very remote, kind of internet deserts in Tuolumne, the city of Tuolumne, and also in Groveland. And those became, they were provided access for internet, a high-speed internet. So in a case of an emergency situation, or even just general access points, they could, our community members, our kids, could go to those resilience centers and access internet. As I mentioned, we worked with our local internet service providers, and they've been expanding with the development of mini tower projects throughout our county, working with our local government. Since we are a small county, we are very well connected with all of our local officials to work on regulations and requirements to allow expansion of mini towers, and especially our tribal partners. They were able to put on their particular lands grants that they have access points that were made available to the community, including students. And that's where we found that our greatest way of getting information out, our best way, was through student ambassadors. Through the community college, we actually recruited student ambassadors. We could never quite keep up with the social media presence of the day, but they know how to access everybody. And they were great at getting out information about, hey, did you know about these programs? You can get a device, you can get internet access. And so we took that down to our high school level as well, with a group called EPIC, includes high school students from all of the high schools, and they became our ambassadors in spreading information. And then the biggest thing that we're doing up here is a shift from using devices. We find that kids know how to use devices, but we find that there is a barrier to using devices as a tool for learning, research, and resource acquisition. So that has been a big learning initiative that we've been doing. And then providing parent training on digital literacy. We've started that, it needs to be expanded. But our biggest challenge up here in a rural area is just simply infrastructure. If we don't have broadband, we can have all the devices we want, all of the apps, video conferencing, but if we can't access it, we can't provide services, and our kids can't access the amazing world that's available online. So that's just some of the things that we've done up here in Tuolumne County.
Thank you, Kathy. That is, you guys are doing a lot. Love to hear about that, especially the student ambassador program. I think it's great to really leverage those amongst us who are very fluent in social media and being able to communicate that out. And I was just kind of curious specifically with that program, what the I don't know if it's a curriculum, if it's how is that program structured? Is it an after school, during school? Like how did you guys go about doing that?
For digital literacy for our parents?
I was actually the student ambassador program, just to kind of...
Okay, so EPIC Coalition for the high school students meets once a month during the school year. They do meet informally during the summer. So during August, we recruit high school students from each of the high schools, and we usually get around 40 high school students, which is a lot for Tuolumne County. Might not be a lot for other counties, but that's a lot for Tuolumne County. And we meet once a month in a central location, and we focus on a particular project for the year around community need that they have identified. And one of the things they identified was social media and having a positive presence on social media. They really were not liking the idea of just being completely off of social media, but really wanted to be the ambassadors of showing positive social media presence. And so from that became, how can we use our devices as a tool rather than that? There was no formal program that was adopted from that. But I will tell you one thing that I forgot to mention was that in the Don Pedro area, which has virtually no internet because of the big project, and there's a little high school down there, Don Pedro High School, they hardly had any internet. But because of the big project, AT&T was able to expand fiber into that area. Now AT&T has spread, had providing access to all the families down there that previously didn't. So now more of our kids are actually taking community college classes and doing even online learning after they graduate from college. So those are just, I hope I know we're stretched for time, so I was trying to rush through that. So I apologize. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much.
And Laura, I just wanted to say thank you, Kathy, for bringing in the kind of the voice of the rural perspective, and definitely, you know, a lot of unique things, particularly the service at the resilience centers, you know, among many of the things that you've talked about. And I see that there's a good conversation going on in the chat about, you know, the challenges that both rural and urban folks face. And I think that's what's so great about this process is we've been able to hear voices from residents and stakeholders from both the urban and the rural areas, and that we know that Broadband for All is really focusing on ensuring that all California residents have access to reliable high-speed internet service, and that from, you know, access to affordable service, access to affordable devices, and the training and skills that they need. And so your voice and what you're bringing to the table here helps kind of round out that conversation. So thank you very much.
All right. We're moving on to Jeff Below. He is an education administrator with the California Department of Education and is going to kind of bring the 30,000-foot statewide perspective to the conversation and help round this out. So Jeff, happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone who's on this, and really appreciate hearing all of the things from the previous speakers. It's always great to hear. I want to go visit Tuolumne County, of course, and down there in Santa Clara County, it's just like, I should go to all these schools again. I just don't get to anymore. Going to take kind of a little different topic or perspective on my comments today, because I don't really have strategies and what I'm kind of seeing. So I wanted to share some strategies, some issues, some topics, some calls to action that have really come from the roundtables I was a part of, and then also some conversations we had recently with the county and local leaders. It's really kind of a quote unquote level setting, if you want to call it that, and say, you know, there's pockets of excellence across the state in pre-K-12. I see our K-12 leaders here. I actually see adult school leaders on here, and really it's like, okay, how do we make these systemic and statewide, and, you know, put it into a plan that we can move forward. Everybody knows me, I'm always like putting things in buckets, and so I want to talk real quick about this in three buckets, as they were. The bucket of connectivity, devices, and training and support when it comes to digital equity, and then round it out with just looking at reporting, because that's where it came from. If we look at the connectivity bucket for digital equity, some of the things that were comments that were made, we're talking about, you know, expediting and just really doing what we can to get the deployment of middle mile and last mile programs out there. Schools utilizing the broadband equity and access deployment funds, or BEAD funds. Sometimes I had to look that up. I'm like, what BEAD? That's what it actually is. To get some interim and alternative connectivity solutions out in rural and in urban areas to fill gaps where the programs there's none out there. Of course, we've had lots of comments about ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. And really the best thing we need to do is actually then not only promote it, but advocate that it's expanded and made permanent, and continue to help with the enrollment process to get families signed up. We know that that's going to be a challenge. As a state, looking at a way to develop a standard low-cost program statewide is something that was another comment that was made. I heard a bit. At the federal level, doing the best we can to advocate that E-rate is expanded to allow schools to expand their service out where there's no provider at all. That's just going to require some advocacy and some rule changes at the federal level. Encouraging schools, and this is something we happened and other education agencies and community organizations to work with schools to apply for the CPUC programs, the Utility Commission programs through CASF, the California Advanced Services Fund. There's also federal funding account, and ultimately there'll be BEAD programs. And so all those last mile programs are going to be available for us to get out into those last final areas, or even final areas that are right across the street from where we may be sitting. There might be a location that's not connected. This is an interesting comment we heard from quite a few schools, is to look at ways to use the school issued devices that are owned by schools to improve mapping and develop standards for the CPUC and FCC data, so that we can have a statewide and federal view and share it. You know, if we have the device that's a school, if we could put something on it to share with the CPUC and the Federal Communications Commission, that will make our data all the better, because that's data and mapping is always a challenge. Talking about devices, moving on to the device bucket, a lot of conversations when it comes to devices and digital equity. What's a standard for a device? It's not just a cell phone, so what's a standard? It's also not a gaming device. So what's in the middle? What is a device? It was great to hear about that, people using Chromebooks, but what is a device, and will a device last? A lot of schools we hear are using capacity grants, private and philanthropic dollars, all sorts of ways to fund one-to-one devices. So every kid can have a device, because it's key that every kid has a device. One of the things that's going to be a challenge is to advocate for a successor to the Emergency Connectivity Fund, the federal ECF fund, so that we can have device funds, a permanent way to fund devices going forward. And that, again, also is going to require advocacy at the federal level. Final bucket of training, looking to identify and develop and adopt standards for digital literacy and training for students, parents, and teachers. It was great to hear those going on at the local level. I was hearing examples. Also, standards on digital citizenship and cybersecurity. It's interesting. We operate, many of us, in organizations where cybersecurity means one thing, but cybersecurity for grandma or cybersecurity for a parent means a whole different thing. And so we need to make sure we have those all lined up. Providing training, ongoing basis for all levels of schooling, for pre-K all through adult and beyond, through our adult schools. That's an important part. And those, we've seen a lot of examples of those across the state. And so how do we make those then systemic and implement them throughout all the schools in the districts statewide? Around all three of these buckets, connectivity, devices, and training, we had some conversations about how do we report, or for lack of a better word, prove this. And because we know there's data, schools will tell us there's data, and probably colleagues in the higher ed, the same thing. There's data on connectivity and devices and training in the systems at the school, but how do we get it up at a regional and a state level? We can't just on a dime turn and collect more data from the state that requires statute, but we know that a coordinated or automated approach to gather the information is what's going to help us tell the story at the regional and state level, and it'll be much more effective and ultimately inform the programs and policy going forward. It'll help us tell our story both in the county level at each of the I've heard from the 2 county superintendents, and also at the state level. Making it automatic, easy is the best thing we can do. So appreciate, let me share some of these things. I know there were some others who were at different meetings I have, and if others have, if I misspoke, I'm sure some of my colleagues will go, "Hey, Jeff, that wasn't what we said." So thanks for letting me be here and share it today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for providing. It was a great aggregate of a lot of information and conversations that you've been having, and really just appreciate you bringing that and sharing it. It's interesting to hear the buckets that you've got stuff in from the state level, and then and having that kind of connect to what we've heard from the other panelists today and presenters. So I was just thinking when you were talking about especially the digital citizenship and skills and awareness, just, specifically like Santa Clara with the program on, helping people understand, privacy and protecting the private information and just stuff like that, skills that, as you said, sometimes we think of cybersecurity and digital skills in a much more maybe corporate or enterprise way, but getting it down to the individual level and the family level. So really want to thank you for that. And also it's really neat every single time we have one of these meetings, being able to hear about programs and creating awareness about what's going on in different areas of the state, rural areas, remote areas, metropolitan areas, and just starting to piece that together. And I think we'll also be talking a little bit more about how that can be mapped out, and we can even create more awareness as we go further into the presentation today. But really want to thank everyone for sharing the programs and the strategies that have really been working for you. And for being here with us today. And Scott, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to that.
Well, just a little bit, Laura, and I think that, yeah, Jeff, thank you for the comprehensive list of both recommendations on the potential uses for digital equity capacity dollars, but also the ongoing need to advocate for the improvement of a lot of things. I mean, we're in this point where we're concurrently planning for the next chapters of Broadband for All, which is bringing the BEAD dollars down to help, connect those last mile, solutions to the unserved, the underserved, and then the anchor institutions. And then on the digital equity side of things, a lot of the work we're doing here is how do we identify best uses for digital equity capacity dollars around things like broadband adoption and digital literacy training and digital navigation, workforce development. So I think that it's really important. One of the things that you mentioned is, I think we all know that mapping is so critical to making sure we divert investments into the right places. And I think that, what we've had a chance to learn at the workshops and in the other places is that there's a strong commitment within California at the state level and at the local and regional level to continue to improve upon the state's data, the state's own map, and then how it informs the federal maps that determine our allocations for funding. So really appreciate you pulling those bullets out, because the digital equity plan, as we develop a draft, we've got to start thinking about, it's not just those, how we're going to use grant dollars, but what are those collective advocacy areas that folks have mentioned that we need to continue working on together that don't necessarily require funding, but require coordination and, synchronous advocacy on those issues. So thanks a lot. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you again to all of our panelists today. Okay, Mel, if we could move to the next slide. Thank you. So this is where we want to hear from you. We've got some prompts for you today. They largely follow the conversations that we were just having, so it really plays off of that. So if we could go to the next slide, please. What we would like to hear from those of you who are participating and attending today, and again, this is where you use the raise hand function so that we can see that you want to provide comment or feedback. And our two questions today are, who are the most effective and trusted messengers in the education space? We've listed some examples there: superintendents, principals, teachers, administrators, librarians, CBOs, and others. And I think we heard today that peer messengers and student messengers are some that we might want to add to that as well. But would love to hear that from you. And then also, what strategies or programs have you seen that have effectively addressed digital equity barriers? And that includes both funded programs, unfunded programs, if there's programs out there that need funding. But what strategies or programs have you seen that are effective? So would love to see some hands raised, and then we can call on you, unmute, and also unmute video. Okay, Kim, we're gonna go ahead and start with you. So I'm gonna, there you go.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Kim Lewis with Scenic. I would definitely agree that peer mentors and peer supports are really a new space that is really growing in the education circles. We have peer support specialists around mental health and those kinds of leading groups for young people. I would also think about coaches and other external folks who are working in school systems, but maybe not your traditional leads, who also are good folks that we want to bring into this conversation for young people. So that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. And maybe building off of that for those of you who are there, if you can think of, I think, non-traditional, when you don't immediately think of, are what we would also love to hear. Phil.
Yeah, I think I'm off mute. A lot of wisdom shared today. Good to hear. I think the CBOs, particularly during the pandemic, were doing some great work around emergency digital literacy and supports. I think we will need, I'll say at least for our region and talking to others, I think it's a common experience is how do we re-engage the CBOs? They can't all do it from the side of their desk unfunded. And yet they're the most trusted digital navigators. How do we make sure they're upskilled to do that effectively? And how do we make sure they've got the curriculum that's most relevant there? And how do we get the anchor institutions like healthcare, for example, or education, to understand how to partner, and the anchor institutions to recognize that partnering long-term will create more resilient ecosystems. I also want to say, relative to who is trusted, we have to recognize that sometimes those who are trusted are also, unfortunately, completely aligned with donors to their organizations and are sometimes actually perpetuating the digital disinvestment that we've experienced over the last 20 years. And sometimes those who are most trusted are ignoring some really important research. One example of that is students in poverty also often get less robust tech in terms of devices and apps, and also less rigorous instruction. We've seen where that's countered effectively when technology is used effectively with quality apps. So I'm going to just push back on, I did research. I was one of the leaders on the Discovery program at Fresno State, and I was one of the leaders in the program. The notion that a student needs an iPad is erroneous. They're not going to be ahead of their peers. They'll be behind their peers when we don't put a laptop in their hands. That's what's professionally expected, right? Now, why do students in poverty get excited about an iPad? Is because the assemblage of technologies in their household is thin, and they're excited about getting a technology. We've got to have, Jeff, to your point, standards about what needs to be in students' hands, and it needs to be what we'd expect to have in those who have the affordances of technology in their households. We had challenges in Fresno Unified around students getting Khan Academy because their teachers would go, well, they don't have connectivity at home, or they don't have a device at home. In the same way, we need our students to be able to show up at college from K-12 with the experience around, for example, machine learning that you can do on a fast laptop, AutoCAD, so that they can actually compete in the engineering program as opposed to being behind, right? So we need standards there. The other thing is, and I so appreciate the superintendents who spoke today. The only way we're going to shift the digital disinvestment is if we all lean in and actually start changing the local infrastructure by sometimes doing it ourselves, sometimes finding grants. But the regulatory environment that caused the disconnect during the pandemic and going forward is still the same regulatory environment. And until the good folks at the CPUC have the legislative rulings, legislative structures behind them, and the FCC is properly leaning in, the practices that the incumbents have had around digital disinvestment will continue unless we all lean forward to change the local infrastructure. And in the meantime, make sure that we do gather data, like Jeff was saying, on every single laptop. Fresno Unified, Fresno County Superintendent of Schools has open sourced our My Quality of Internet, so any school district can adopt it. We got to measure these laptops everywhere to get all that data to make sure we have a source of truth that we all know to be much more certain than the claims of the carriers. Because 5 to 10 years from now, if we have done our job well, every student will have been able to learn throughout their day with the best technology available and the best teaching available, so that they're better prepared for futures that we know are much different today and going forward. And thanks for everyone for leading in. This is such an important historical moment.
Thank you, Philip. And it looked like your comments and following on Jeff's about the standard of device really resonated in chat. So thank you so much. Jason Horgan.
Thank you. So just a couple answers to the question around who the most effective trusted messengers are. And I think, I think they're all equally important depending upon who you're talking to. And so the importance, what I really found valuable about this year's planning and the work this team has done is bringing us together as heterogeneous groupings during the face-to-face events. I had an opportunity to go to this event at Santa Clara County Office of Education, and it was amazing to hear the work that's going on in those community-based organizations in those different sectors. We all are doing and have the same vision and mission, but we're all doing it in parallel. And having those conversations and collaborations cannot just stop this year. I think having Digital Equity Task Force to support this effort is going to be needed regionally, locally, and statewide. Is going to really need to help shift the paradigm because you can't just do it one time only. You have to really do it with these partners, with these organizations, to move all the peer groups along in an equal fashion. So I think, as an educator and a person who's been in education for the last 20 plus years, my focus is education, but I also need to partner with those librarians, and learning about the digital navigator programs with the libraries was fascinating. Here in Santa Cruz County, actually our county is working on a broadband initiative program plan, a 5-year plan, and including education, including libraries, and getting those meetings together. And who facilitates those meetings, who's convening those meetings locally with statewide support, I think is going to help us move things along across the state in future years. The second piece around strategies, we were funded, County Office of Education was funded through the California Department of Education Foundation to support helping school districts and LEAs create digital literacy and equity strategic plans. And so we actually built an application tool and a crowdsourcing tool to help educators create actions that can go into this plan, and actually help 5 school districts build out plans for the future, next 3 years, of how they're going to implement digital equity. So I think programs like that, where you can actually build scaffolding tools to help districts make it easier on them, how we can incorporate it in existing plans. And so now all the school districts we work with have this plan that they can then build into their implementation strategies over the next few years. So we're really happy, and there's a big push for those districts and those LEAs to really build capacity within a group of leaders to focus on digital equity and literacy. So I'm just going to go ahead and share a link around some of those examples of those districts and the work they've done. But I think it's a great opportunity to showcase a standardization around how we're going to build out digital literacy in our schools specifically. So thank you for the time, and thank you for the efforts.
Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks for sharing those links out there. Raina Lavelle, if I remember correctly, from Winters.
Yep, from Winters. Thank you so much. So I kind of a little bit of going off what Jason just said. to address that first question, I think it's kind of difficult to answer that unless we know who our audience is and what's actually being asked, right? Like, as a director of technology, I can speak to what I think our migrant families need, but unless our migrant families' voices are being heard, like I can't speak for them. And so although I might be like the most trusted, effective messenger in my district, like at the district level, unless we're speaking to the people who are being impacted by the inequities, right? And we're saying, we need your voices at the table, like Jason said, these task forces, making sure everybody is present, you know, unless we're saying, what are we asking about? And are we asking the right people, right? Somebody that's trusted in this circle isn't necessarily who we want in that circle, depending on the question itself. So, you know, I think making sure that all voices are represented in whatever capacity they need to be is the way to do it, right? Kind of talking in a circle there. And then to the second one, you know, the ACP program for us being super tiny and rural has been great. But again, until the infrastructure is there, we only have one ACP provider. So it, you know, it's not as helpful if you live on the west side of town where there is no ACP provider. You qualify, but there's nobody to get you service. So, you know, it is a struggle for us in that regard also. But I do think ACP is helpful for families that need it. It's helping, you know, get connectivity and not put the cost of that on the district. So it's nice.
Thank you so much, Raina. Nita?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You know, I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible, but I think, you know, what it's already actually been said, the student, I think, is the trusted messenger. They're exactly going to tell us what works, what's not working. I think, you know, there's that added benefit that we heard those non-traditional roles like the coaches and the navigators are bring that value to the table and can really kind of extend what we've been kind of talking about when it comes to these resources. But I think, you know, again, if you don't already know me, Netta Anasari, I represent adult education in our state. And so, you know, what strategies or programs have effectively been addressing digital equity? I think leaning into your adult schools. And so we know adult education can be as broad as higher ed, you know, community colleges and so on, but within the K-12 districts, so supporting the whole learner. So Jeff, you've heard my spiel before, the whole learner, when they walk into that kindergarten class or that pre-K class, they're going into represents that district. So leaning into the resources there so we can support the whole learner. There's so many, and within, you know, even outside of those public school districts, there are other funded agencies that adhere to the California Adult Education Program, along with a lot of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act Titles 1 through 4 that can also provide those resources. So I think that there's so many digital paths, digital equity paths, and resources that each one of those agencies are providing. And so leaning into those free resources that are already being offered through the California Adult Education Program within the districts, within those nonprofit organizations, I think could be useful. So hopefully I haven't taken up, I know we're past time, so I'm just trying to make it as brief as possible.
No, we're good, and really appreciate hearing from you, Nita. Thank you so much. And actually, I think we're okay on time right now. So it's a perfect time to transition to our next slide. Before we do that, I really want to thank those of you who took a moment to share your thoughts with us. I want to encourage the conversation to keep going in the chat. I noticed that I almost called on you, Krister, because you are an example of one of the trusted messengers that has been identified by several of the groups, but encourage everyone to keep that conversation going and reach out to one another if you want to learn how to connect and partner more. So the next item that we're going to kind of turn things over to is some of our calls to action. So I'm going to turn this over to our Broadband Equity Partnership to go over what is going on with the surveys in California. We've talked about them for a while and they are now here. So BEP, turning this over to you. And Sean, there you are. Turning it over to Sean. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. Sean Doherty with the Broadband Equity Partnership. Thrilled to be able to talk to you about some of the data gathering work that we're doing throughout the state. First off, that I want to highlight is, I believe the last time everybody gathered, this digital equity survey was still in the works, but we are thrilled that it has been live for the last couple of weeks now. We put a lot of work into making it very accessible. It is mobile friendly, so hopefully you can see that QR code. If you were to scan that QR code, the survey will come up right on your screen. We have it in 14 different languages, both audio and visually available in all of those languages. Really to help people with limited literacy in those languages, or limited if they might have a visual impairment. As someone mentioned earlier, I believe it was Raina, about needing to collect the voices of the people who are, on the ground experiencing digital inequities. This is really about hearing from them and collecting their stories and their data, and how we can incorporate that data into the solutions that we propose, or that will be proposed in the digital equity plan. Next slide, Mel. So, as you can see, in the few weeks that this has been live, we have over 3,500 responses, 3,600, and that's a map that kind of shows where those responses are mostly coming from. We want to see as many people from across the country. I think 3,600 is pretty good for a couple of weeks, but as always with surveys, we can do better. If you see your county or your area on there not doing so great, we're asking you, the call to action is to share this with your networks. And we'll, in just a few slides, show you exactly how we can help you do that. A lot of great area from coverage from rural areas, urban areas throughout the state, but we are looking for more responses throughout. And next slide, Mel. And so again, we have over 3,600 responses so far, a completion rate of 70%. So if someone does open the survey, they are 70% likely to complete it. And as we mentioned earlier, we have 14 languages, and 13 of those 14 languages have been utilized. So I think it just shows the diversity of our state, the need to have more services offered in these languages. And we're thrilled, we see the Chinese language, Spanish, a lot of languages really being taken up, as well as a pretty good representation of the covered populations. We're really looking to hear from people in rural communities, especially, Dr. Pham spoke to that, covering Hartnell College covers a lot of rural areas, Tuolumne County, we would love to hear from people living in your areas. And so the more that we can get from these covered populations, we would appreciate it. And next slide, Mel.
Yeah, actually, before we move on,
sure.
I wanted to point out, if you could go back to the first slide. They're right there. No, I'm sorry, the second slide. So in terms of accessibility, what's interesting we've seen is that the survey's actually working. And when you look at the top 5 counties, you've got LA and San Francisco, which are, obviously very populous counties in the lead, but then Santa Cruz is next, and Inyo and Plumas, 2 very small rural counties, are getting really good response. And when you go back to the next slide, thanks to a lot of folks on this call, our co-chairs and other state entities, we did take a little bit longer with getting the survey out, but because of the accessibility features with the language and the audio, I think it's pretty amazing that it's got a 70% completion rate in terms of that. So Sean, I didn't mean to stop your flow.
No.
I just wanted to say that we have a lot of folks on this call that have big networks and direct connections to students and families and teachers and CBOs. Really a call to action that the survey was designed to bring in more of the voices of the residents in this, very populous 167,000 square mile state with nearly, 40 million residents. We would love it if we could get to 10,000 responses. If we could get enough critical mass in each of these areas, we will make the raw data public so that school districts, regions, counties, cities can use it if they don't have the capacity to do their own surveys. So just wanted to really note, thank you all for the help you've provided thus far. And if you look at the sort of the chart on the right, you can see the covered populations. I think Chris was asking that in the chat earlier, who have self-identified as respondents to the survey. So it's been a really good way for us to get a lot of great feedback on the individual, barriers and challenges of folks. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Sean, back to you.
Yeah, no, all great points to highlight even further. Completely agree with you. And moving on from the public survey, we're going to do a demo of both of these tools afterwards. So going kind of high level, and then we're going to show you exactly how these tools work. So the other tool is for organizations such as yourselves, the DEAM tool, the Digital Equity Ecosystem Mapping tool. And please share this with, other CBOs, other county departments of education, religious organizations, nonprofit organizations, any organizations in your area or who may not be operating in your area, but of that do this work throughout the state of California. This is who we want to hear from for the DEAM tool. This is where we want to capture, how like CSU success is merging device distribution with technology training, accessibility, unique ways to look at accessibility like in Tuolumne County. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Mel. As you can see here on the map, we have about 200 or 280 total responses, and that's kind of a heat map that we see of where those responses are coming in from. We want to hear from representatives of every single county. Probably not surprised by some of the LA County, some of the more urban areas or higher populated areas having more responses, but we want to hear, we know there are programs operating and providing services in every county, and we want to hear from as many of those as possible. You are colleagues, you are partners, you are organizations doing the same work. So please share. Another call to action is please share this DEAM tool, completed your organization yourselves. And if you've done that, thank you so much. We are really appreciative of that. So next slide, Mel. Yep, and another just call to action. Here are some of the quick links. This is actually that top link down there underneath the partnership is our toolkits. And we're going to walk through and demo that too. We have ways, we have social media prepared for you. We have one-pagers prepared for you. If it's coming to the end of your school year and you're able to print out a flyer and put it in kids' backpacks, let's think creatively about ways of sharing some of this outreach and the toolkits, both for the survey and for the DEAM tool. We have all of that prepared. So Mel, I think with that, we are on to the demos, correct? Yes. So this is the State Digital Equity Public Survey. It says it takes 10 to 15 minutes. It took me 7. So I think, 15 minutes is a little bit on the high end. So again, this is for the households, the individuals, residents of the state. We're asking for, one person per household to complete this. You can see right there on the cover page how you can just link on any of those languages and the page automatically refreshes. I don't know if you want to demo that, Mel, or not. Or even up at the corner, you can toggle there and the page instantly changes to that language. And you can see down at the bottom corner where there's also, it looks like a little audio play button. All of those pages can be read aloud in all of those 14 languages. All you have to do is click. Let's see if we can get an audio sampling.
Plano sa digital equity sa estado ng California.
Great. So I heard that. I hope that came through for everybody. So again, encouraging everybody to share this in your networks far and wide. If you want to click on the next button, Mel, we can go to the next page. Great. And, you know, the first questions are, you know, relatively simple. We're going to gather some demographic materials. Are you 18 and older? Do you reside in California? Are you part of one of the covered populations? What is your zip code? And you can see it's clean, it's easy to read. That's why it is really good being able to complete this on your mobile device. And again, it takes less than, you know, about 10 minutes to complete, and it's not onerous. Let's move over to the Deem tool.
Hey,
And
Sean,
again, this
before
is-
we do that,
Sure.
can you just note that we have a fairly extensive and evolving outreach toolkit to support folks on supporting the digital equity plan, which includes translated, you know, invitation letters to individuals, newsletter articles. There's social media that we're building out to be by functional area. This is an education working group. But all of these are available, and you know, we continue to build based on needs. So please look through here. We want to make it as easy as possible for folks to promote the survey, and we'd love to get additional suggestions on how we might be able to help further.
Yeah, and Mel has the page up right now of the toolkits of where you can access all of that information. You know, as Scott mentioned, flyers, social media, and that's available right on that Broadband for All website, as well as through the bit.ly link. Absolutely. Someone has a question around the due date. Yes, it'll be open through at least June 30th. Scott, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
Well, yeah, so we want some urgency behind this and don't want it to get lost in the summer. So we will keep it open for the next 2.5 weeks till June 30th. Obviously, if we get a critical mass and you know, based on your feedback, we can keep it open longer, but we'd like to keep that June 30th deadline for now, and just ask that, you know, folks, you know, push it out and promote it as much as you can now, and let's target June 30th.
Perfect. And back to the Deem tool. So for the organizations, for all of y'all here, and for your partner organizations doing this work, this is what, again, where we're asking you to take part. This survey is available in English and Spanish, and up at the top corner, again, you can toggle to instantly have the page change between the two languages. Again, it takes about 10 minutes. Mel, if you want to go to the next page, you know, the first part of it starts off pretty standard: name, organization, you know, contact information. And as you scroll down, it's how does your organization identify as a CBO, a religious organization? And so as you're completing this and you say, oh, you might see an organization that maybe you didn't think of like, oh, maybe my library, do they know about it? It's a good way to kind of think about who maybe your colleagues are, or the organizations that you partner with this within this work are. And here at the bottom, we will ask you about programs that you have and areas that you operate in. Do you provide device distribution? Do you do digital skills and digital literacy training? And so just to get to we really want to capture all of the resources that exist across the state. I think Scott summed it up best as saying pockets of excellence. We want to hear from and know about all those pockets of excellence. And if you want to click to the next page, I think this, if maybe you're short on time, if this is all that you're able to do, thank you. If you have links to white pages or white papers, if you have links to annual reports, to data sets, to work that you've done in conjunction with academic partners, please upload it here, add links. All of this will be uploaded into our portal. While we would absolutely love all additional information that you can provide, if this is all that you have the capacity or the bandwidth for right now, this is wonderful for us to see. And then after that, it is the survey would be completed. I do also want to highlight that there is a specific Deem tool for ISPs. Mel, if you just want to show that real quick. So if you work with, make sure that you're possibly sending this out to your ISPs in your area. Kathy, with your satellite providers in Tuolumne County, any ISPs that are operating in your area. Again, it'll ask about, do they offer the ACP? Do they offer devices? Again, it's just making sure that we have as much information so that our digital equity plan is as powerful and as data-driven and as thoughtful as possible. And if you want to go back to the toolkit to highlight one last item, is under these survey instructions. This is basically written out every question that you can expect through the DEEM tool. It is comprehensive. Again, this section 1 is this basic information, and if you provide any other services, you will get asked additional questions, but this helps you to prepare in advance and to be able to go in there and quickly do it. I found this incredibly useful, and just really wanted to highlight and showcase it so that people feel supported while they're completing the survey. So that's our DEEM tool for organizations and ISPs. Again, the public survey, please share that with your networks far and wide. We are here to support you in that effort, and we have these toolkits, hopefully, that make it easy for you. Anything else, Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much, Sean, and to thank everyone to provide or to reinforce the importance of the survey and the DEEM tool is that it is supporting both the development of the state's digital equity plan and will inform the state's BEAD 5-year action plan. And so as much granular feedback as we could get from residents as possible, it will be a better informed digital equity plan on the residential side. On the DEEM tool, the state, both the Department of Technology and the PUC, are being asked to develop an asset inventory throughout the state of organizations that are working on digital equity and broadband, what existing programs are out there that could be leveraged, or what that are currently working in this space or could be leveraged. So you don't have to be working in digital equity. And really, I think given that the moment in time we're at is what we're going to be able to leverage once in a generation or once in 100-year investments to close the digital divide. If you all who are going to be critical, you've been critical partners in the planning of the digital equity and the BEAD plans, and will also be critical partners in implementation. The better data we get, the better we can target where the investments need to be, and the better we can develop grant programs that support the needs of the community, both the individual needs and the organizational needs. And Netta has a hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or do you have a question?
It's a celebration hand, but also some feedback. You did ask for it. So, one of the things that we did was send out the surveys, both surveys to, our adult education providers, along with our, hopefully extending it to our adult education students. Unfortunately, when I attended the in-person convening in mid-May is when we started kind of distributing those surveys. And so mid-May is usually kind of wrapping up the semesters and graduation and those type of things. So, we will see way more results if, there are some flexible times within the fall. One of the things that we tried doing was we do our national wrap-up meeting, and all of our state administrators were hopping on the call, and they basically said, we would have loved to complete this, but we wish we had a little bit more time to complete it, and or if it came earlier. So, just some feedback if you're still needing more data, maybe the fall semester might give you some more.
Well, and thank you for that. One thing, so number one, we heard it, and what I think what's cool is that if we can prove out that this online survey works, we could potentially do this every year and use it as a tracking mechanism to track the success of the digital equity plan. One of the constraints that we have is that for the timeline on the digital equity plan, we're aiming to do a draft plan by the end of late July, early August. And so that's why we need as much feedback, by June 30th. We could potentially extend it some into the summer. And I also understand that back to school could be a great period for schools. We would try to figure out how we could reconcile that, because we're going to put the draft plan out for public comment in August and be pulling together the data. We have to have a final plan into the NTIA by November of this year. So we would just encourage y'all and ask you very humbly and gratefully to help us to the extent we can, promote this as far and widely as we can. And if it gets to that point, we will see if we can extend it into the fall. Just don't want to make any promises on that.
Thank you, Nina, and thank you, Scott. Just wanted to, and thank you those of you who are sticking with us here. Just wanted to make you aware and ask you to also share out if you do work with tribal leaders, members, or representatives. We do have 4 upcoming events, 3 of which are in person. And if you do have contacts or know folks who would be interested in attending and having their voice heard, please email us at that digital equity email, and we will provide the link for them to register. And also just to thank you for everyone who did come out and join us for the 17 in-person events that we did across the state. We were very, very happy to see you there. Next slide. We're almost there. So just some upcoming events. We are wrapping up the outcome area working groups, so you will see those in the next few days. Tomorrow we have both digital literacy and inclusion and workforce and economic development. On Thursday we have health and essential services, accessibility, and civic engagement, and then we will be having the tribal collaboration in July. For the statewide digital equity planning group, we have meetings on Wednesday, July 26th and Wednesday, October 25th. Those will have registration information up on the portal as we get closer. So next slide, if we can kind of wrap it up here. Just a reminder, this is what we need. I think we've said it many times here today. Scott literally just got done saying it. What we really need help with from you is to, if you haven't yet yourself completed the digital equity survey, the public one, share with friends and family, let them know that their voice truly does matter. And then also complete the DEEM tool. If you are an organization or if you work with organizations, please share it with them. If you work with ISPs, please share the ISP DEEM tool with them. And then coming up, as Scott mentioned, we will provide a draft for public comment that will be publicly available. That will be most likely posted on the digital equity portion of the Broadband for All portal. So you can look for that. If you haven't signed up for our newsletters on the Broadband for All website, please do sign up for that, because more than likely that's where you will get a heads up that that is available. So last slide is just really a wrap up and contact information, and really want to thank all of you for being here today, for joining us and being with us for the last technically 5 months, even though we've had 4 meetings, and participating in the conversation, continuing to be here, adding your voices to what we're hearing, and the digital equity planning process for California. So thank you all. I hope you have a fantastic afternoon, and hope to see some of you at subsequent meetings this week. So take care, everyone.
Thank you.